The gangster genre was revolutionized by Martin Scorsese's 1990 release. Goodfellas was unique among gangster flicks. Audiences were left breathless, and cinema was irrevocably altered as it raced through 3 decades of mob life, fueled by cocaine. The most disturbing stories, however, occurred off-screen. What if I told you that? Things that Lorraine Bracco, Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro, and Ray Liotta had concealed for decades are finally coming out today. A group of actual criminals who paid daily visits to the set. The impromptu lines that frightened even the most jaded members of the staff. The scene was so lifelike that the FBI interrogated the directors. And there was that terrifying scene at the premiere when the real gangster characters sat in rows apart from the actors portraying them. Think you're acquainted with Decent Men? The actors have finally spoken out about the behind-the-scenes drama that occurred while filming this masterwork. This wasn't your average film set. From the actor who got actual death threats to the notorious moment that needed an unprecedented 75 takes. Walking the fine line between the real criminal underworld and Hollywood was a perilous balancing act. There were days I wasn't sure if we were making a movie about the mob or making it with them. After today's revelations, you'll understand exactly what he meant, and you'll never watch Goodfellas the same way again. Martin Scorsese, the man behind the film adaptation of the novel that nearly never happened. Nicholas Pileggi's explosive 1985 nonfiction book Wise Guy, which chronicles the life of Henry Hill, was the seminal work before Goodfellas became a film milestone. We were almost robbed of a masterpiece on many occasions when the trip from page to screen nearly derailed. I declined to read it, Martin Scorsese says. My viewing of crime flicks came to an end after Raging Bull and Mean Streets. When my agent sent the book, I didn't even crack it open. Time slipped away. There was dust on the book. Suddenly, destiny stepped in. Scorsese tells the story of how he was at rock bottom. A major studio production had failed. At 2 in the morning, I picked up Wise Guy and Pileggi in a state of despair. I merely stated, "I've been waiting for this book my whole life." He thought I was a lunatic. In response, Pileggi remarked, "I've been waiting for your call my whole life." The partnership encountered strong opposition right away. Initially, all of the studios passed. Producer Irwin Winkler discloses, "Too violent, too morally ambiguous. No clear hero. Where's the redemption? Where's the punishment?" We said that's exactly the point. Warner Brothers eventually gave the project the green light, but with considerable concerns. Concerns regarding legal matters troubled them. According to Scorsese, we were portraying real criminals, many still alive, some in witness protection. The studio lawyers nearly shut us down weekly. The solution? Change names, alter timelines, composite characters, but even this created problems. Henry Hill was contractually forbidden from visiting the set, according to Pelly. He was being protected as a witness. Despite the fact that his presence posed a threat to everyone, he managed to sneak aboard more than once. Seen a recreation of his life that he couldn't resist. Intense, unconventional teamwork resulted in the script's evolution. Scorsese and I were quite productive. Pileggi remembers working 15-hour days. Based on my findings, I would share anecdotes. If Marty wanted to interrupt, he'd pace. There you have it. There you have it. We used a documentary-style format with narrative elements interwoven throughout the film. Ray Liotta played the role of Hill, who embarked on his own peculiar quest. I stalled Scorsese, he says laughing. Stumbled upon him at a cafe and then at a film festival. I was Henry, and I knew it the 3rd time around when I nearly got arrested. I felt it deep within. Hollywood heavyweights were courted by the studio. Tom Cruise, Alec Baldwin, and other larger names were desired. Marty was adamant when Ray claimed he had the perfect blend, according to casting director Ellen Lewis. Subtle intelligence hiding behind the eyes, masked by charisma. The studio was only willing to make concessions when we had De Niro and Pesci. There was an obsessional quality to De Niro's dedication. According to Pileggi, while inside, Bob contacted the actual Jimmy Burke, who was fictionalized as Jimmy Conway in the film. Upon recognizing the caller, the guards abruptly ended the conversation. It is a federal criminal to have contact with specific inmates. Bob was indifferent. He had some reading to do. The script's veracity wasn't free. Some of our technical advisors were reluctant to reveal their identities. Scorsese exposes the guys who had ties to each other, illuminating details that were known only to those on the inside. How funds were transferred up the chain. The correct method for pistol whipping garlic without making marks, and the real approach to using a razor blade to slice garlic. You couldn't find answers to these questions in books. The vetting process was the most troubling part. Pileggi says with precision that screenwriters forwarded specific scenes to individuals with ties to the real crew shown in the film. Revisions were made. Just that this didn't happen in this manner. No further details. No questions were asked. We simply made the changes. The dynamic, fractured, subjective narrative style of the film was born out of this intertwined reality. Just another glossy gangster flick wasn't in our plans. We were making a documentary about someone who happened to be a gangster, Scorsese recalls, explaining that the technique had to reflect Henry's conscience. Adult paranoid who uses cocaine and is always on the lookout for danger. As pre-production came to a close, the seriousness of their task became apparent. We were depicting individuals who murdered for far less than a negative representation in a film, Liotta adds in a low voice. The lack of protection on set compounds this problem. It was open to everybody. Contrast it with today. Before I got in my car and drove home, I began to look under it. Despite Scorsese's reluctance to read the novel, it would eventually become the picture he was destined to direct. The threats, however, were only getting started. The improvised horror show that shook a whole country. How ironic. The history of cinema was written by 2 words. Plus, the script never called for them. Everything comes down to your storytelling style. How ironic. We didn't practice the part where Ray Liotta's eyes widened in shock at the remembrance. Absolutely not. The now famous line, "You're a funny guy turned deadly threat," is based on a real incident that Tommy Joe Pesci had. During warm-ups, Joe shared a tale with us. In an interview, Scorsese discusses an incident from his youth when he told a mobster he was hilarious while working as a waiter. It was not taken as a compliment by the person. Something shifted in the atmosphere. Right then, Joe felt like he might pass away. A revelation struck Scorsese. It's like that. Anxiety replaced mirth all of a sudden. The randomness of human aggression. Scorsese improvised with Pesci and Liotta instead of writing it down. Their reactions, the nervous laughter, the tension, are all real. According to Liotta, who admits, "We didn't tell the other actors at the table what was coming." It was believed that Joe might really detonate. For the most part, the rest of the film was structured around this method. According to Lorraine Bracco and Karen Hill, Marty would discreetly give each actress specific instructions before a scene. Both Ray and I would receive separate instructions, totally at odds with one another. It was just the kind of disarray and suspense he was going for in his film. Beyond the talk, the improvisation continued. Tommy lashes the owner of the restaurant with a pistol in this scene. Then Scorsese stooped down. The performance was staged by us. Very exact. Remember Dina Allen, the script supervisor? Joe then said, "Can I just go with it? One take, no rehearsal." What you see is real shock on everyone's face. This approach created problems for the crew. Continuity was a nightmare. Everyone was shocked. Each take was affected by the discourse. The motions shifted. The tone changed emotionally. Attempting to get every detail was like trying to record a cyclone. Improvisational editing gave rise to the notorious Layla scene in which victims are found in vehicles, trash trucks, and freezers. Editor Thelma Schoonmaker clarifies that they shot those murders independently. Editing is where the idea of a montage was born. He suggested, "What if we show the aftermath all at once, the bill coming due?" We restructured the entire middle of the film around that insight. The most demanding improvisation came during the film's cocaine-fueled paranoia sequence, Henry's final day of freedom. That scene was outlined, not scripted, Scorsese explains. I wanted it to feel like we were experiencing Henry's cocaine psychosis firsthand. The helicopter tracking shot wasn't in the script either. That came from a practical problem. Scorsese reveals, "We needed to show Henry's paranoia escalating while covering a considerable amount of narrative. The continuous shot gives the impression that time is running out and that you are trapped." The way Liotta looked in these scenes wasn't all staged. He tells me that he stayed up for days. Lack of sleep, not due to medicines. Using methods to an extreme. Between takes, I started hallucinating throughout the latter scenes. Apt for Henry's frame of mind. I am in danger because of this. Unexpected moments of genuineness were developed by the improvisatory approach. The part where Henry is sleeping and Karen puts the gun to his face. Bracco hunches over. Ray had valid concerns. I should have known better than to fire the gun during practice, but I did. An abrupt click roused him from his slumber. He was afraid, bewildered, and half asleep when he reacted. That's the one Marty retained for the movie. There was some deliberate improvising. The actual Henry Hill was a continual caller to the set. Liotta defies studio policy and court demands to expose. By phone, he would relay messages. "You won't find me doing it that way." Personally, I wouldn't use such phrase. Over time, I began secretly implementing his recommendations. Henry himself gave me phrases to improvise with during a few of my performances. The most infamous part of the film was the improvised ending, in which Henry broke the fourth wall and addressed the audience by name. Scorsese says they tried a more conventional finale, but it was unsuccessful. I revised it the evening before our last day. Henry is grieving his death and is speaking to us directly. He does not yet know what he did wrong. This time, Ray got it perfectly. A film that feels dangerously alive and always surprises. Even after dozens of viewings, Goodfellas' peculiar energy is formed by this controlled anarchy. According to Scorsese, they weren't following the script. We were trying to bottle lightning. Perilous, erratic, and, when it succeeds, unforgettable. On set, the genuine mafiosi. Real gangsters stood on the sidelines as Hollywood created its portrayal of the mafia. According to Associate Director Joseph Reedy, there were instances when they would simply appear, clearly uneasy. There was a lack of context and anonymity. Nodding and offering little suggestions, they would observe a scene. This is how a truly wise man would hold his cigarette. I mean, that's not how they would keep track of the money. Minor points. It was no accident that these people showed up. The subject of our filming had gotten out, Scorsese admits with a touch of caution. Interest grew among those with ties to the real crew we were playing. Although the production did make use of law enforcement officials as legitimate technical advisors, Scorsese freely admits that the most helpful feedback frequently came from anonymous visitors who had some knowledge of our filming schedule. An especially unsettling exchange is what Ray Liotta remembers. In between takes, I'm working on imitating Henry's movements. No one from crew or security approached this older man, who then said, Henry's left hand twitched when he was nervous, not his right. I ask how he knows. He just smiles. Me and him did business, then walks away. Never saw him again. This was the unexpected help that the iconic Copacabana tracking shot received. We're practicing the kitchen walk, Liotta says. Then an employee in the kitchen takes me aside. I was here when the real Henry did this. Starts showing me exactly how Henry moved, who he greeted, how the staff reacted. Later, I learned he'd worked at the Copa since the 70s. He'd actually been there. These encounters extended beyond the set. I was researching Karen Hill's character in a restaurant in Little Italy. Lorraine Bracco recalls. A woman approaches, doesn't introduce herself, just says Karen had more style than you're showing. She was one of us, not some outsider. Gives me specific details about how Karen dressed, how she wore her jewelry. Only later did I realize I'd been speaking with someone from the actual community. Props and costumes received unusual scrutiny. We had visitors comment on the accuracy of the watches, the pinky rings, the specific knot used for neckties, remembers costume designer Richard Bruno. One man said nothing during an entire visit, then stopped at a rack of suits, pointed to one, and said, Jimmy wouldn't wear that color. We changed it immediately. The famous never rat on your friends scene prompted unexpected feedback. Look at me. Never ride on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut. After we shot it, Dyro says carefully, someone connected to the production told me Jimmy wouldn't have been that direct. He'd have made the same point, but more subtly. We res-hot portions with a more nuanced approach. Joe Pesci, who grew up adjacent to the world they were portraying, became a conduit. People from my old neighborhood would call. Pesci explains, pass messages. Make sure you show this right. Not threats. Exactly. Let's call them strong suggestions. The production maintained plausible deniability. These weren't official consultants. Producer Barbara DeFina emphasizes, just people who happened to visit. We didn't ask for credentials. This created a surreal production environment. You'd have FBI technical advisors on set one day, Scorsese recalls, and the next day people who, let's just say, they had a different perspective on the events we were portraying. The famous cooking in prison scene received particular attention. That scene is documentary accurate. Paley notes, we had detailed instructions on how they actually prepared meals, sliced garlic with razor blades, exactly what they cooked. People who had been there themselves provided that data. The most unsettling parts were when the line between confession and technical authenticity crossed. Sometimes a visitor would watch a scene depicting a specific crime. Scorsese says carefully, and casually mention a detail we'd gotten wrong, something not in the book, not in court records, something only a participant could know. The production walked an ethical tightrope. We weren't glorifying these people, Scorsese insists, but we needed to understand them to portray their world accurately. The line between research and complicity sometimes blurred. The ultimate test came with the film's release. Several individuals portrayed in the film under different names attended the premiere. Paley reveals they sat in the same theater as the actors playing them. The actors didn't know until afterwards. One sent a note. You got it right. Whether that was a compliment or a warning, I'm still not sure. The unprecedented technical challenges behind Goodfellas' revolutionary style laid technical innovations and challenges that pushed film to its limits, creating techniques now standard in modern cinema. The famous Copacabana tracking shot, a 3-minute unbroken journey following Henry and Karen from street to table, represented a logistical nightmare that changed how complex camera movements were planned. That shot wasn't about showing off. Scorsese emphasizes it was about experiencing Henry's specific power, how the world literally parts before him, how he bypasses normal rules. You needed to feel that in real time without cuts. The technical execution proved almost impossible. We rehearsed for an entire day, recalls cinematographer Michael Ballhaus. Then shot 15 takes. None worked perfectly. The Steadicam operator was drenched in sweat, having to navigate narrow passages while keeping perfect framing. The solution came from unexpected precision. We measured every step, Ballhaus explains, literally marked where each footstep would land. The timing of doors opening, people moving, choreographed to the second, like a ballet where one mistake ruins everything. The shot established a new standard for long takes. After Goodfellas, these became expected in serious films, notes Scorsese, but ours served character and story. It wasn't technical showing off. That's the difference. The famous helicopter sequence depicting Henry's cocaine-fueled paranoia required unprecedented coordination. We needed to show Henry's disintegrating mental state while maintaining narrative clarity, explains editor Thelma Schoonmaker. The solution was matching the editing rhythm to his increasing panic, cuts getting faster, more jarring as his day spirals out of control. This necessitated a fresh strategy for coverage. We shot that day from every conceivable angle, Scorsese recalls. Close-ups of dashboard controls, helicopter rotors, rear-view mirrors, food cooking, pills being sorted, hundreds of angles for a sequence that lasts minutes on screen. The innovation extended to sound design. We created what we called audio flash-forwards, explains sound designer Skip Leaves. You hear dialogue from the next scene before you see it, like Henry's thoughts are racing ahead of him. It creates the sensation of a fracturing consciousness. The film's revolutionary use of popular music, a virtual wall-to-wall soundtrack spanning 3 decades, created both artistic and technical challenges. No film had ever used that much popular music, Scorsese states. The rights alone nearly sank the production. The famous pistol whipping scene scored to Atlantis by Donovan demonstrated the technical precision involved. The violence is choreographed exactly to the music's crescendo, explains Maker. We actually adjusted the speed of the footage slightly to match specific beats that required technical solutions that didn't exist before this film. The aging effects showing characters over a 25-year span required innovations in makeup design. We couldn't rely on obvious aging prosthetics, explains makeup designer Alan Weisinger. These characters age differently than normal people. The stress, the excess, the violence ages them uniquely. We studied photos of actual aging gangsters to capture the specific way this lifestyle weathers human beings. Most challenging was maintaining period accuracy across changing decades. The film moves from 1955 to 1980, notes production designer Christy Zia. That's not just different cars and clothes. It's different textures to the world. The glossy 50s, the garish 7S. We created specific color palettes for each era to subcommunicate the passing of time. The film's voiceover narration, now a much imitated technique, required technical innovation. We didn't want traditional voiceover that explains the action. Scorsese notes, we needed Henry's voice in your head, sometimes contradicting what you're seeing, sometimes mid-sentence, jumping to Karen's perspective. That necessitated some careful sound design in order to make it sound less like you're listening to narration and more like you're inside someone's mind. Technical judgments were even needed for the film's aspect ratio. Instead of using widescreen, we shot in 1.85:1 ratio. According to Ballhaus, it makes the body feel more cramped. Despite their luxury, these folks live in a world with constraints. That psychological truth had to be reflected in the framing. One of the most groundbreaking aspects of the picture was its use of freeze frames, which halted the action at crucial points triggered by the feeling of adrenaline. We aimed to capture that neurological sensation on film, as Scorsese puts it. When something shocking happens, your mind sometimes freezes the image. 1981. Henry Hill's subjective experience was brought to life through these technological breakthroughs, which had a unique aim. Each technical option addressed a single query. Scorsese stresses, what does it feel like to be Henry right now? That fact was the one that technology aided, rather than the reverse. The end product was an epic that went beyond the typical gangster film. It transported viewers into the emotional and psychological realities of his universe. Scorsese concedes that the technical difficulties almost destroyed us. However, They brought forth a new phenomenon, a movie that transports you to another world for 2 hours, not merely depicts it. Those performances that eternally altered the course of acting. Joe Pesci's Academy Award was only one of many honors bestowed upon the groundbreaking performances in Goodfellas. Their groundbreaking work revolutionized cinematic acting and has lasting effects on the industry. According to Scorsese, the performances were exceptional because they were devoid of sentimentality. Viewers' pity was not being sought. To make them more likable, no one was sugarcoating these characters. For protagonists, that was unprecedented. The way Ray Liotta dealt with Henry Hill defied common knowledge. "I didn't pass judgment on him," Liotta says. "I didn't characterize him as nice or evil. It's just him narrating his tale, using his own warped reasoning. How sympathetic he is up to the audience." The uncomfortable authenticity was established by this non-judgmental approach. Re-exhibited Henry's authentic happiness in this life. Scorsese says, "The glitz, the influence, the access. It seems like a requirement for most crime films to depict the hero's moral dilemmas. Henry is short on them. That is the essence of the performance's unsettling and authentic quality." Tommy DeVito, played by Joe Pesci, is still one of the scariest monsters in film. Someone who used uncertainty as a weapon. "The other performers had no idea what I was planning." Exhibiting excessive planning, Pesci discloses, "The fear you see is often genuine. They didn't know if I'd whisper or scream, be still, or explosive." Joe used to work on changing his emotional state. Scorsese remembers this. Instantaneous elation to fury. The abrupt brutality that characterized these men's world occurred without any transition or warning. He would rehearse between takes in front of mirrors, first laughing, then suddenly turning into a violent maniac. The effectiveness of this method was showcased in the well-known "Get Your Shine Box" sequence. "Mom, it's time to head home and grab your shining box." In Scorsese's explanation, the actor Frank Vincent was aware of an impending explosion, but he was unaware of the exact magnitude of Joe's detonation. The startle, the feeling like things are getting out of hand. Faking it will not work. The scary power of quiet was presented by Robert De Niro's Jimmy Conway as an alternative sort of dread. Real power, Bob realized, isn't shouting. Scorsese says, "His eyes, his micro-expressions, are Jimmy's greatest threat." Throughout the entire film, he uses very little volume. De Niro utterly submerged himself. According to Paley, he worked with money the same way they did. Positioned the bills in the same direction and in the same order of denomination. He learned that on his own. From whatever source, he absorbed it. He didn't see these people as characters. As he channeled them, they became real. Lorraine Bracco's treatment of Karen Hill, who she transformed into an unprecedented mob wife, was the most groundbreaking. "I will not use her for dramatic effect or as a victim. Karen is a willing participant," Bracco says firmly. "This way of life, this power, this sense of self, she adores it. With an open mind, she takes decisions." This led to an unsettling moral ambiguity. "Our point was to demonstrate that guys aren't the only ones corrupt." Scorsese elaborates. Despite the brutality, Karen makes use of her position and relishes in its perks. Lorraine would not let herself be ethically reduced. This method is exemplified by the well-known scene where Karen learns to conceal the gun. According to Bracco, she is not horrified. This has arousal in her. The threat and the plot unite them. Some women are attracted to these men for troubling reasons. That fact is typically watered down in movies. A new standard for depicting mob bosses was set by Paul Sfino's Paulie. The terrible calmness of true authority was something Paul finally grasped. Scorsese elaborates. "Paulie is so in control that you can almost hear him stifle a murmur. He never explains anything, and he uses the most subtle gestures." It was astonishing to see how Sfino's body changed. In his eyes, he saw Paulie, he said. "For a while, I would clench my jaw and hardly flex my face muscles. It took me a few weeks, but I finally figured out how to make my eyes appear emotionless. At that moment, I realized I had located him." A cohesive universe was generated from the group dynamic of these performances. It was a level playing field. No one is trying to steal the show in Scorsese's film. It became clear to them that these individuals are part of a unique social system governed by unspoken norms and regulations, much like an ecosystem. Most importantly, the actors were not afraid to be likable or even dislikable. It is expected that modern characters would possess redeeming traits, observes Scorsese. Actors like this take on roles that are endearing but ultimately harmful. They left them unsoftened so that the audience might relax. This veracity extended to the most minute of bodily aspects. According to Paley, Liotta observed Henry's hand gestures and the way he handled his cigarettes. "Jimmy, according to Niro, would never eat anything with his fingers. He even needed a fork to cut bread. It wasn't an acting decision. These were notes taken by an anthropologist. All parts of the production were affected by the actor's dedication. If they didn't feel genuine, they wouldn't say those lines. It is not from a place of vanity, but of duty to the truth that Scorsese discloses. Joe was consistently correct when he said that Tommy wasn't the type to express himself in that manner. As a result of everyone's hard work, the performances seem more like documentaries than plays. There is no conventional performance going on here. Its essence is mirrored by Scorsese. For a moment, the boundary between actor and character vanished as they absorbed these people entirely. This groundbreaking discovery revolutionized film acting by proving that complex moral dilemmas might hold an audience's attention better than simplistic acts of heroism. Scorsese observes that the standard for exceptional performance in film underwent a sea change following Goodfellas. The legacy that revolutionized cinema was authenticity, which supplanted likability as the paramount value. Goodfellas wasn't only a hit when it premiered in 1990. It changed the language of filmmaking forever, impacting prestige television of today, as well as Pulp Fiction and The Sopranos. According to producer Barbara DeFina, it was the Monday after its opening. For reasons unrelated to meetings or employment, we began receiving calls from younger filmmakers. They were quite interested in our method, approach, and execution. It was as if we had unveiled a novel cinematic vocabulary. All eyes were on the figures. The film's economic success for such tough content was seen in its $46 million domestic gross on a $25 million budget, even if it wasn't a blockbuster. With a faint smile, Scorsese recalls that the suits who questioned every choice were suddenly taking credit. We opposed these CEOs on the basis of brutality, moral ambiguity, and structure. Out of nowhere, they were risk-takers who believed in artistic vision. The narrative innovations of the film eventually became the norm in the industry. Film researcher David Thompson argues that voiceover was no longer limited to exposition after Goodfellas. It evolved into a device for character development, allowing writers to ironically separate the words and deeds of their characters. Wolf of Wall Street and House of Cards both drew inspiration from here. New opportunities were opened up by the disjointed temporal structure, which allowed for hopping forward and doubling back. According to scriptwriter Nicholas Pelleggi, nonlinear storytelling was considered artiste terrain prior to this film. After Goodfellas broke through, Pulp Fiction continued the trend, but Goodfellas proved to Hollywood that it could be profitable. The cast felt a direct and intimate connection to the film's message. "I couldn't get cast as anything but a gangster for years," says Liotta. "The performance was too convincing. Casting directors couldn't see past it." Joe Pesci's career transformed overnight. "I went from character actor to star," according to him. But it was complicated. People expected Tommy DeVito in person. Would be disappointed I wasn't psychotic. The role followed me everywhere. Lorraine Bracco found herself TYP cast in a different way. "I wanted to build on Karen's complexity," she reveals. "Instead, I got offered mob wife roles, stripped of everything that made Karen interesting. Just decorative women saying be careful to their gangster husbands." It was frustrating. Most significantly, the film revolutionized how crime stories were told on screen. Before Goodfellas, crime films were either glamorized fantasies or simplistic morality tales, notes Martin Scorsese. "We showed the seduction and the destruction simultaneously. The lifestyle's appeal alongside its horror. This dual perspective created a template for modern crime stories. The Sopranos doesn't exist without Goodfellas," states television critic Alan Sepinwall. David Chase took this approach, showing the banal alongside the brutal, the family dynamics alongside the crime, and expanded it to series length. The film's visual techniques became fundamental to modern film. The tracking shots, the freeze frames, the whip pans, these moved from stylistic choices to basic cinematic grammar, explains cinematographer Roger Deakins. Watch any premium cable series now. You'll see Goodfellas DNA in every episode. The soundtrack strategy using period-specific pop music as narrative commentary transformed film scoring. Before Goodfellas, needle drops were transitions or mood setting, explains music supervisor Randall Poster. After they became storytelling devices themselves, Tarantino took this further, but Scorsese established that pop songs could function as a narrative voice. For Scorsese personally, the film represented vindication after difficult years following controversial projects like The Last Temptation of Christ. Goodfellas reminded Hollywood of what I could do. He acknowledges it gave me creative capital I've been spending ever since. What few realized was how the film would predict America's fascination with anti-heroes. We didn't know we were creating a template for the next 30 years of protagonists. Scorsese reflects characters who do terrible things yet remain compelling. Tony Soprano, Walter White, Don Draper, they're all descendants of Henry Hill's specific moral complexity. The technical innovations became industry standard. The way we used freeze frames, text on screen, multiple narrators, these were radical then, notes editor Thelma Schoonmaker. Now they're taught in film school as fundamental techniques. For the real Henry Hill, the film's success brought unwanted attention. He was in witness protection, but kept blowing his cover. Pelagie reveals would tell people in bars, "That's me in the movie." Finally, the government threw him out of the program. Said he was beyond protection. The film's most significant legacy may be its influence on younger filmmakers. Every important American director under 60 cites Goodfellas as an influence, notes film historian Peter Bisson. It's the most referenced, most studied, most imitated film of its era. Scorsese sees the film's cultural impact with mixed feelings. We were showing the corrosive effects of this lifestyle. He emphasizes the spiritual emptiness behind the materialism. Yet so many viewers only saw the excitement, the power. They missed the cautionary aspect entirely. This misreading doesn't diminish the film's artistic achievement. Great art is often misinterpreted. Scorsese acknowledges. What matters is that 30 years later, we're still discussing it, not as a period piece or historical curiosity, but as a living, breathing work that continues to speak to audiences. Perhaps the ultimate testament to the film's power comes from its subjects. The real Henry Hill once told me he had trouble separating his actual memories from the film's portrayal, Pelly reveals. That's the ultimate compliment to what we created. It became more real than reality itself. Conclusion: as far back as I can remember. And that brings us to the end of our journey through the extraordinary truth behind Goodfellas. From the book that almost never became a film to the improvisation that terrified a nation. From the real gangsters who haunted the set to the performances that changed acting forever. These revelations transform how we see this landmark achievement in American cinema. What makes Goodfellas endure isn't just its craftsmanship or innovation. It's the perfect storm of circumstances that created it. A director at the height of his powers. Actors willing to embrace moral complexity without flinching, in a production that walked the dangerous line between portraying a criminal world and interacting with it. In many ways, making Goodfellas mirrored its subject. A high-wire act where success and disaster stood separated by the thinnest margin. Scorsese and his team risked their reputations, sometimes even their safety, to tell a story with unflinching authenticity. That commitment to truth over comfort, to complexity over simplification, created a film that continues to feel dangerously alive decades after its release. The film reminds us that the greatest art often emerges from risk, from the willingness to show human beings in all their contradictory, uncomfortable reality. Its very existence represents a victory of artistic vision over commercial formula, an achievement that transformed our expectations of what mainstream American cinema could accomplish. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of film's most influential masterpieces, hit that like button and subscribe for more revelations about the classic films that shaped our culture. We uncover the stories that other channels are afraid to tell. What's your favorite scene from Goodfellas? Has this inside look changed how you view it? Let us know in the comments below. Next up, we're exposing the untold story behind another iconic film. The production chaos, studio battles, and near disasters that almost prevented a masterpiece from reaching the screen. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, in cinema, as in life, the most powerful stories are the ones that dare to show us uncomfortable truths about ourselves.